Every night, I count the number of times I was looked at that day. Not glanced at, looked at. The kind of look that means someone registered my existence, even for half a second. Most nights, the count is 0. I started doing this because I wanted proof that I was real, that I hadn't dissolved into the background completely. But somewhere along the way, the counting became something else. A ritual, a prayer, a way to keep myself tethered to a world that had already forgotten me. On the night everything changed, I counted 3 times. 3 moments when someone's eyes landed on me like I was solid, like I was there. But here's what I can't explain. I don't remember who those people were. I don't remember their faces. And when I try to recall the moment, all I can see is her, standing in the hallway with her hand pressed against the wall, saying my name like she'd been waiting her whole life to say it. I was 7 years old when I first understood that some people are born to be noticed, and others are born to watch from the edges. It happened during a school play, one of those chaotic productions where every child is given a role, no matter how small, so no parent feels left out. I was a tree. Not the talking tree, not the enchanted tree, just tree number 4, stage left, holding my arms up for 40 minutes while the real characters moved and spoke and existed in ways I couldn't understand yet. My mother had sewn the costume herself, brown fabric wrapped around my torso, green paper leaves stapled to my sleeves. I remember the way the staples scratched my wrists every time I moved. I remember standing backstage, listening to the audience laugh at jokes I couldn't hear, applause I wasn't part of. And I remember the exact moment when I realized that no one, not my parents, not my teacher, not a single person in that auditorium was looking at me. They were looking through me. It's a strange thing to feel invisible at 7. You don't have the language for it yet. You just know that when you raise your hand in class, the teacher's eyes skip over you like you're part of the furniture. You know that when teams are chosen at recess, you're picked last, not because you're bad at the game, but because people genuinely forget you're standing there. You start to wonder if maybe you're doing something wrong, if there's a secret everyone else learned that you somehow missed. So I started watching. I watched the loud kids, the ones who could walk into a room and fill it with themselves. I studied the way they moved, the way they laughed, the way they demanded space without apology. I tried to mimic it once, raised my voice during lunch, told a joke I'd practiced in my head 17 times. The table went quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, the anticipatory kind, the awkward kind, the kind that makes you wish you could swallow your words back down and disappear into the floor. After that, I stopped trying. I built a world inside my head instead, a world where I wasn't invisible, where people saw me and wanted to know me and remembered my name without having to check the attendance sheet. In that world, I was interesting, I was noticed, I mattered. And the strange part is, the more time I spent in that internal world, the more the real one faded. I stopped caring if I was picked last. I stopped raising my hand. I stopped expecting anyone to see me at all. By the time I was 13, I had perfected the art of not being noticed. I knew exactly where to sit in a classroom to avoid being called on. 3rd row, 2nd seat from the window, just outside the teacher's natural line of sight. I knew how to time my movements in hallways so I'd never accidentally make eye contact with anyone. I knew which bathrooms were always empty during lunch, which corners of the library no one ever visited, which routes home had the fewest people. I became a ghost in my own life. But here's the thing about being invisible. It's not that people can't see you, it's that they choose not to. They look right at you and their brains just slide past. Like you're a blank space, a gap in the pattern, something their minds can't quite process. And after a while, you start to believe that maybe you really are nothing. Maybe the emptiness they see when they look at you is the truth. Maybe you were never supposed to be seen at all. I kept a notebook during high school, not a diary, that felt too precious, too important. Just a notebook where I wrote down observations. things I noticed about people, about the way they interacted, about the invisible rules that seemed to govern social existence. I filled 7 notebooks over 4 years. Pages and pages of notes about conversations I wasn't part of, relationships I only witnessed from a distance, emotions I experienced entirely alone. No one ever asked what I was writing. There was one teacher, Mr. Harrison, who taught English literature. He had this habit of looking directly at students when he spoke, really looking, like he was trying to see past whatever mask they were wearing. The first time he looked at me like that, I felt my chest tighten. It was September, and he'd asked a question about metaphor in a poem we'd read. My hand wasn't raised, it never was, but he called on me anyway. "What do you think?" he asked, and his eyes held mine. I don't remember what I said. I just remember the feeling of being seen, really seen, for the first time in years. It was terrifying and exhilarating and unbearable, all at once. After class, I went to the empty bathroom on the 3rd floor and cried for 20 minutes. I couldn't explain why. I still can't, not really. Maybe it was relief. Maybe it was grief for all the years I'd spent unseen. Maybe it was just the shock of existing, suddenly, in someone else's awareness. He never called on me again after that. I don't think he forgot about me. I think he saw something in my face that day, some raw terror, and decided to let me hide again. I was grateful, and I hated him for it. By the time I graduated, I had become so good at being invisible that I could walk through my own life without leaving a trace. My yearbook photo looked like a placeholder image, the kind of face you'd forget the moment you turn the page. I had no entries under my name, no clubs, no achievements, no memories contributed by friends, just my name, my photo, and a blank space where a person should have been. I moved away for college to a city where no one knew me, where I could start over. Except I didn't start over. I just became more of what I already was. I chose a small apartment on the 7th floor of a building where the neighbors never made eye contact in the elevator. I registered for large lecture classes where attendance wasn't taken. I found a job shelving books at the university library, working the early morning shift when the building was almost empty. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I preferred it this way, the silence, the solitude, the freedom from expectation. I told myself that being invisible was a choice, a kind of power, a way of moving through the world without the burden of other people's perceptions. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I would stand in front of the mirror and try to remember what I looked like. Not the physical features, those were easy, but the essence, the thing that made me me. And I could never quite grasp it. It was like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder I looked, the more I disappeared. I started having this recurring dream. I'm walking through a crowded street, and everyone is moving around me, through me, like I'm not there. I try to speak, but no sound comes out. I reach for someone's arm, but my hand passes through them like smoke. And then I look down at my own body and realize I can see through it. I'm fading, dissolving, becoming less and less substantial until finally, mercifully, I disappear completely. I always woke up from that dream with my heart racing, my hands pressed against my chest just to feel something solid. On a Tuesday morning in October, something changed. It was barely perceptible at first, just a feeling, a shift in the air around me. I was shelving books in the poetry section, running my fingers along the spines, when I felt it. The sensation of being watched. Not the paranoid kind of watched, not the uncomfortable kind, just noticed, seen. I turned around, but there was no one there, just empty aisles and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. I thought I was imagining it. I went back to work, sliding books into their designated spaces, losing myself in the familiar rhythm of the task. But the feeling didn't go away. It followed me through the rest of my shift, lingered as I walked home, stayed with me as I unlocked my apartment door and stepped into the familiar darkness. That night, I counted 3 times, and I couldn't remember a single face. There's a version of me that no one has ever met. She lives entirely in my head, in the space between what I am and what I wish I could be. She's confident without being loud, interesting without trying, the kind of person people naturally gravitate toward. She knows how to laugh at the right moments, how to tell stories that hold attention, how to exist in a room without feeling like an apology. I've spent so much time with her that sometimes I forget she isn't real. When I'm alone in my apartment, I practice conversations with her. I know how pathetic that sounds, but it's the truth, and this is supposed to be the truth. The things I've never told anyone, the secrets I keep even from myself most days. I'll be washing dishes or folding laundry, and I'll start talking out loud, testing different versions of myself, different ways of being. Oh, that's interesting, I'll say to the empty room, trying on the words like clothes. I never thought about it that way. Sometimes I catch myself in the mirror during these moments, and the person looking back at me is a stranger. Her mouth is moving, forming words that sound almost right, almost natural, but her eyes give her away. They're the eyes of someone who's watching herself from a distance, evaluating, judging, finding herself lacking in ways she can't quite name. I have a collection of almost friendships, people I've orbited for weeks or months, close enough to feel the warmth of connection, but never close enough to actually touch it. There was Emily from my statistics class who sat next to me for an entire semester. We'd exchange small pleasantries before lecture. Did you finish the homework? This coffee is terrible. I'm so tired. The kind of shallow interactions that feel like friendship when you're starving for connection. I thought maybe we were becoming friends. I thought maybe she saw me as more than just the quiet girl who sat in the adjacent seat. Then, at the end of the semester, she turned to me and said, "It was nice sitting next to you. What was your name again?" I told her, I smiled, I said it was nice sitting next to her too. I went home and didn't leave my apartment for 3 days. The thing I've never told anyone is this. I'm not shy because I'm afraid of people. I'm shy because I'm afraid of the moment when they realize I'm not worth knowing. I'm afraid of the look that crosses someone's face when they understand that there's nothing interesting behind the quiet exterior, no hidden depths, no secret brilliance, just emptiness, just a girl who spent so much time hiding that she forgot to become a person worth finding. I read somewhere that everyone has an inner monologue, a constant stream of thoughts narrating their experience. Mine is a prosecutor. It catalogs every awkward moment, every failed interaction, every time I opened my mouth and nothing interesting came out. It replays conversations on a loop, finding all the places where I could have been different, better, more. It's exhausting living with that voice, but it's also familiar. It's the only company I've ever been able to keep. Sometimes I fantasize about what it would be like to be someone else for a day. Not someone famous or extraordinary, just someone normal. Someone who can walk into a coffee shop and order without rehearsing the words 17 times in their head. Someone who can make small talk without feeling like they're performing a complicated dance they never learned the steps to. Someone who exists in the world naturally, easily, without constantly checking to make sure they're doing it right. I wonder if normal people know how lucky they are. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment that I go to every Sunday morning. I always order the same thing, black coffee, no modifications, nothing that requires extra interaction. I sit at the same table by the window and I watch people. I've created entire lives for the regulars, stories I tell myself about who they are and where they're going. The woman with the red coat is a novelist working on her second book. The man with the beard is a professor who's secretly in love with his teaching assistant. The college student with the headphones is composing music that will change the world. I've been going there for 8 months, and not one person has ever asked my name. But 2 weeks ago, something strange happened. I was sitting at my usual table, pretending to read, but actually watching the door, when a woman walked in. She wasn't a regular. I would have remembered her. She had the kind of presence that pulls focus, not because she was trying to, but because she simply existed more fully than other people seemed to. She ordered something complicated, something with 3 different modifications, and she didn't apologize once. While she waited for her drink, she looked around the coffee shop. And then her eyes found me, really found me. Not a glance, not a casual sweep of the room. She looked at me like a puzzle she was trying to solve, like there was something about me that caught her attention and held it. I felt my face get hot. I looked down at my book, but I could still feel her gaze. When I finally worked up the courage to look up again, she was gone. That night, I wrote about her in my notebook. Not the observations I usually make, the clinical dissections of social interaction. Something different, something closer to poetry, though I'd never admit that to anyone. I wrote about the way she'd looked at me, about the feeling of being seen by someone who actually wanted to see. I wrote until my hand cramped, trying to capture something I didn't fully understand. I went back to the coffee shop the next Sunday, and the Sunday after that. She wasn't there. I told myself I wasn't looking for her, that I was just maintaining my routine, but I know what it feels like to lie to yourself. I'd been doing it for years. Here's what I've never told anyone. I'm terrified that if someone really knew me, really understood what goes on inside my head, they'd be disappointed. Not angry, not disgusted, just disappointed. Like they'd expected something more and found only this. A girl who counts the number of times she's looked at each day, who practices conversations with herself, who's so desperate for connection that a single moment of eye contact from a stranger can occupy her thoughts for weeks. I'm terrified that the person I am is exactly as uninteresting as I fear. But I'm also terrified of the alternative, because what if someone did see me, really see me, and they didn't look away? What would I do with that? How would I exist under the weight of someone else's attention? I've spent so long building walls around myself that I don't know how to let anyone in without the whole structure collapsing. Last week, I was shelving books in the library when I found a note tucked between the pages of a poetry collection. It was written in pencil on a torn piece of notebook paper, and it said, "To whoever finds this, you're not as invisible as you think you are. Someone sees you. Someone always sees you." I checked the book out that same day, even though I'd already read it. I've been carrying it in my bag ever since, and sometimes, when I'm alone, I take out the note and read it again. I tell myself it wasn't meant for me, that it was just a random act of kindness left for no one in particular. But part of me wonders. Part of me hopes. Part of me is terrified of what it would mean if it was. That feeling I'd had in the library, the sensation of being watched, it started happening more frequently. At the grocery store, on the bus, walking home late at night. Not threatening, not intrusive, just present. Like someone had finally turned their attention toward me and couldn't look away. I started checking over my shoulder, scanning faces in crowds, trying to identify who it was. But I never found anyone. Just strangers living their own lives, none of them interested in mine. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind, if the loneliness had finally broken something essential inside me, creating phantom sensations of connection where none existed. I almost wished that was true. At least then I could name it, categorize it, find a way to fix it. But then she appeared again. It was a Thursday, and the library was almost empty. I was in the basement, in the section we call the archive. Old books no one reads anymore, kept more out of institutional obligation than actual use. It's my favorite place to work because I can go hours without seeing another person. The fluorescent lights down there flicker sometimes, and the air smells like dust and forgotten paper, and it's the closest thing I've found to peace. I was cataloging a box of donations, old hardcovers with cracked spines and yellowed pages, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I didn't look up. People occasionally wandered down to the archive by mistake, realized there was nothing interesting there, and left. I'd learned to make myself even smaller during these moments, to become part of the furniture so thoroughly that visitors would feel like they were alone. But the footsteps didn't retreat. They came closer, deliberate, and unhurried, until they stopped right in front of my desk. I looked up. It was her, the woman from the coffee shop. She was holding a book, a slim volume of poetry I recognized from our collection, and she was looking at me with that same intensity I'd seen before, like she'd been searching for me, like finding me here, in this forgotten corner of the library, was exactly what she'd expected. "You work here," she said. Not a question, an observation. "Yes," I managed, though my voice came out smaller than I intended. She set the book on my desk. "I need to return this. I checked it out 3 weeks ago, but I've been carrying it around, trying to find the right time to bring it back." She paused, and something shifted in her expression. "I found a note inside. Did you write it?" My chest tightened. "What note?" "The one about being invisible." "About someone seeing you." Her eyes held mine, and I couldn't look away. "It's your handwriting on the checkout card. I checked." I should have denied it. I should have said I didn't know what she was talking about, that maybe another librarian had written it, that it was probably just a coincidence. But instead, I heard myself say, "No, I found that note. I didn't write it." It was the truth, but it felt like a lie. Or maybe it was a lie that felt like the truth. I couldn't tell anymore. She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "Do you believe it, what it says?" "I don't know," I whispered. "My name is Maya," she said, and she said it like she was offering me something valuable, something I could choose to accept or refuse. "I've seen you before, at the coffee shop. You sit by the window every Sunday and watch people like you're collecting stories." I felt my face flush. I didn't think anyone noticed. "Most people don't notice anything," she said, "but I'm not most people." She picked up the book again, running her fingers over the cover. "And neither are you, I think. You're just very good at pretending to be no one." Something cracked open inside me, not painfully, more like a door I'd kept locked for so long that I'd forgotten it was even there. "Why are you here?" I asked, and I wasn't sure if I meant here in the library, or here in my life, or here at all. "Because I saw you," she said simply, "and I wanted to know if you'd see me back." She left after that, before I could formulate a response, before I could ask what she meant. She left me sitting in the basement, surrounded by forgotten books and the ghost of a conversation I couldn't quite process. I stayed there long after my shift ended, replaying her words, trying to understand what had just happened. That night, the sensation of being watched intensified. It wrapped around me like a presence, warm and undeniable. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. It should have comforted me. Instead, it terrified me. Because I'd spent so long being invisible that I didn't know how to be anything else. The next day, she was waiting for me when I arrived at the library. She was sitting on the steps outside, reading the same poetry book, and when she saw me, she smiled. Not a polite smile, not the kind strangers exchange in passing. A real smile, the kind that suggests shared understanding, inside jokes, history. "I didn't know if you'd come back," I said, though I was the one who worked there, the one who had to come back. "I always come back to things that interest me," she said, standing and falling into step beside me. "And you interest me." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to understand what she possibly saw in me that warranted this attention, this persistence. But I was afraid of the answer, afraid she'd realize her mistake, that I was just an empty vessel she'd projected something onto, that the moment she truly knew me, the interest would evaporate. She came back every day that week. She'd find me in whatever corner of the library I was working, and she'd sit nearby, reading, or sometimes just watching me. We'd talk in fragments, small observations, careful questions, answers that revealed just enough without giving everything away. I learned that she was a graduate student studying psychology, that she'd moved to the city 6 months ago, that she was writing her thesis on the invisible structures of social connection. "That's what drew me to you," she said one afternoon. "You move through space like you're trying not to disturb the air around you, like you're apologizing for existing. I wanted to understand why."
And do you? I asked. Understand why? She was quiet for a moment. I think I'm beginning to. I should have felt exposed, dissected. Instead, I felt something closer to relief. Someone was finally looking at me, really looking, and they hadn't turned away. But then strange things started happening. Little things at first, easy to dismiss. I'd come home and find objects moved slightly from where I'd left them. A mug on the wrong side of the sink, a book face down instead of closed, my jacket on the chair instead of the hook. Nothing dramatic, nothing that couldn't be explained by my own forgetfulness. But I knew I hadn't moved those things. I found a new note in my bag one morning, written in unfamiliar handwriting. You're getting closer to something. Don't stop now. I showed it to Maya, and she examined it carefully, her expression unreadable. Do you know who wrote this? She asked, watching her face. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something like concern in her eyes. No, I didn't write this.
That evening, walking home from the library, I had the overwhelming sensation that someone was following me. I stopped several times, turned around, scanned the sidewalk behind me. There was never anyone there, just empty street, lengthening shadows, the sound of my own footsteps echoing back to me. When I reached my apartment building, Maya was standing in front of it. She wasn't waiting casually. She was standing there like she'd been there for hours, like she'd known I'd need her to be there. We need to talk, she said, and her voice was different now, urgent, almost afraid. About what? She looked past me, down the empty street, and then back at my face. About why I really came to find you, about what I've been trying to tell you since the beginning. She took a breath. You're not invisible because you're forgettable. You're invisible because someone is making you that way. The world tilted slightly. What are you talking about? Come inside, she said, and I'll explain everything. We sat in my small living room, the space between us charged with something I couldn't name. Maya had made tea, moving through my kitchen like she'd been there before, finding mugs and spoons without asking where anything was. I didn't comment on it. I was too focused on the way my hands were shaking, the way reality felt like it was bending around us, becoming something unfamiliar and dangerous. I need you to trust me, she said, and I know that's asking a lot because we barely know each other, but everything I'm about to tell you is true, even if it sounds impossible. I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic. I'm listening. She sat across from me, leaning forward, her eyes never leaving mine. 2 months ago, I was at a conference on memory and perception. There was a presentation by a researcher who'd been studying what he called social ghosts, people who exist in a kind of perceptual blind spot, people who are technically present but somehow failed to register in other people's conscious awareness. He had documentation, case studies, brain scans showing altered neural processing when subjects were shown photos of these individuals. My chest felt tight. That's not real. That can't be real. That's what I thought too, Maya said, until he showed us a photograph from his research. It was a crowd scene, maybe 40 people. He asked us to count how many people were in the photo. Everyone in the room came up with the same number, 39. But he insisted there were 40. He pointed to a figure in the center of the image, clear as day, and none of us could see her. We looked right at the space where she was standing, and our eyes just slid past. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through something, then turned the screen toward me. It was a photo of a coffee shop, my coffee shop, the one with the window table where I sat every Sunday. How many people do you see? She asked. I counted. 6. There are 7, she said quietly. You're one of them. You're sitting at your usual table, and you're visible in this photo, but no one who looks at it can actually see you. No one except me. I stared at the image, searching for myself, and there I was, sitting exactly where I always sat, holding a book, existing in perfect clarity. But Maya was right. I hadn't registered my own presence when I first looked. My brain had simply categorized that space as empty. Why? My voice cracked. Why would this happen to me?
The researcher had a theory, Maya said. He believed it starts in childhood, usually from trauma or extreme social anxiety. The brain develops a kind of defense mechanism. It learns to suppress certain social signals to make the person less noticeable as a form of protection. Over time, this becomes self-reinforcing. You believe you're invisible, so you act invisible, and people's brains learn to cooperate with that belief. You become what you think you are. I felt tears building behind my eyes. So I did this to myself? No, she said firmly. You survived something. This was how you learned to survive. But now it's become a prison. Why can you see me? I asked. Why are you different? She was quiet for a moment, and something painful crossed her face. Because I used to be like you. I used to be a social ghost. I know what it feels like to move through the world like you're not really there, to watch life happen around you without ever being part of it. I spent 5 years learning to undo what my brain had taught myself, learning to be visible again. And now I can see others like me. Others like we used to be. Used to be, I repeated. You said used to be, but I still am. I'm still invisible. Not to me, she said, and that's where it starts.
One person seeing you, really seeing you. It disrupts the pattern, breaks the spell. That's why I've been coming to find you. That's why I've been trying to pull you out of the shadows. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my entire life of isolation, all the years of feeling like I didn't matter, could be explained by something external, something that wasn't just fundamental brokenness in who I was. But there was a part of me that resisted, that clung to the familiar narrative of my own inadequacy. If this is true, I said slowly, then why don't I remember? Why don't I remember the moment I became invisible? Maya's expression shifted. What's the earliest memory you have of feeling unseen? I thought back to the school play, to standing on stage as a tree, to the moment I understood that no one was looking at me. I was 7. It was during a school play. I realized no one could see me, even though I was right there on stage. And before that, she pressed, do you remember anything from before you were 7? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came. My childhood before that moment was just blank, not fuzzy, not vague, completely absent. I could remember facts, my address, my parents' names, the color of my childhood bedroom, but I couldn't remember existing in those spaces. I couldn't remember being seen. There's something you're not telling me, I said, my voice barely audible. Something about why you really came to find me. Maya stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. The researcher who discovered social ghosts, he didn't just study them, he was tracking them, building a database, creating profiles. He believed that people like you, like I used to be, were exhibiting signs of something bigger, something he called perceptual displacement. He thought you weren't just being overlooked, you were being actively erased from certain kinds of memory and recognition. Why would someone do that? She turned back to face me. That's what I've been trying to find out. And here's what I've found. Every social ghost I've identified has one thing in common. At some point in their childhood, usually right before they became invisible, they witnessed something they weren't supposed to see. And then their memories of that event and everything before it were somehow suppressed. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to set down the mug. What did I see? I don't know yet, she admitted, but I think you're starting to remember. Those notes you've been finding, the feeling of being watched. I think it's your own memory trying to surface. Your brain is fighting against whatever made you invisible in the first place. A memory flickered at the edges of my consciousness, not a full image, but a sensation. Cold tile against my back, a voice saying my name, urgent and afraid, hands covering my mouth, the smell of chlorine and something else, something chemical and wrong. There was a pool, I whispered. I remember a pool. Maya's face went pale.
Where? When? I don't know. There was a pool, and I was hiding, and someone was looking for me. Someone who knew my name. I looked up at her. Someone who said my name exactly the way you said it the first time we met. Like they knew something about me I didn't know about myself. She moved toward me, kneeling in front of my chair. Listen to me very carefully. If your memory is coming back, then whoever suppressed it might notice. They might come back to finish what they started. Who is they? I asked, even though I was terrified of the answer. I don't know, she said, but I know they're real, and I know they don't want you to remember. That night, after Maya left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and tried to push deeper into the memory of the pool, but it was like trying to grasp smoke. Every time I got close, my mind would shear away, finding something else to think about, any distraction to avoid confronting whatever truth was buried there. At 3 in the morning, I gave up and turned on the light. That's when I saw it. Another note, this one placed on my nightstand while I'd been lying there in the dark. The handwriting was mine. I recognized it immediately, but I had no memory of writing it. It said, "Stop looking. For your own safety, stop looking. Forget again. It's better to be invisible than to be found." I called Maya at dawn. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. I wrote myself a note, I said without preamble, but I don't remember writing it. It's telling me to stop, to forget again. Where are you? Her voice was sharp with urgency. My apartment. Should I not be here? Stay there. Lock the door. I'm coming over.
She arrived 20 minutes later with a backpack and a laptop. Her hair was pulled back severely, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept either. She came inside quickly, locking the door behind her and checking the windows like she expected someone to be watching. "We need to talk about what happened when you were 7, she said, setting up her laptop on my kitchen table. "I've been doing research all night. I found something." She pulled up a news article dated 18 years ago. The headline read, "Local swimming pool facility closes amid investigation." I scanned the article, my eyes catching on familiar details, the name of the facility, the address, the timing. It had been in my neighborhood. I would have been 7 years old. "They never released the full details," Maya said, "but there were reports of inappropriate conduct involving minors. Several employees were questioned. The facility closed before any charges were filed. The whole thing was buried." She looked at me. "Do you remember going to this pool?" I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was there. I could smell the chlorine, feel the humid air against my skin, hear the echo of voices bouncing off tile walls. I was hiding in a storage room, my small body wedged between cleaning supplies and pool equipment. Someone was calling my name. Not a parent, not a lifeguard, someone else. "I saw something," I said, opening my eyes. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. The memory came in fragments, sharp and disjointed. I was 7 years old, and my mother had dropped me off at the pool for swimming lessons, but the lesson had been canceled, something about the instructor being sick, and no one had called to tell us. I'd wandered through the facility looking for someone to tell me what to do, and that's when I'd heard voices coming from one of the back offices. I'd been a curious child, the kind who listened at doors and peeked through windows. I'd approached quietly, standing on my tiptoes to see through the small window in the door. Inside, there were 3 adults, 2 men and a woman. They were looking at photographs spread across a desk, photographs of children, photographs that made my stomach hurt, even though I didn't understand why. One of the men looked up suddenly, and his eyes met mine through the window. His face changed, became something terrible and cold. He moved toward the door, and I ran. I ran through the facility, my wet shoes slipping on the tile, until I found the storage room. I hid there for what felt like hours, listening to someone calling my name, getting closer and closer. "They found me," I whispered to Maya. "They found me, and they said if I told anyone what I'd seen, something bad would happen. Not to me, to my parents. They knew where I lived. They knew everything about me." Maya was typing rapidly on her laptop. "Do you remember their faces?" "No, that's the strange part.
I can remember the fear, the hiding, the threat, but when I try to picture their faces, there's just nothing, like someone took an eraser to that part of my memory. That's consistent with induced memory suppression, Maya said. There are techniques, psychological manipulation combined with trauma, that can create selective amnesia, especially in young children. The memory doesn't disappear completely, it just becomes inaccessible. But why make me invisible? I asked. Why not just erase the memory completely? Maya turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a document, clinical notes from what looked like a psychological study. Because erasure isn't always reliable, memories can resurface. But if you make the witness functionally invisible, if you train their brain to believe they don't matter, that no one sees them, then even if they remember, even if they tried to tell someone, they won't be believed. They'll be dismissed as attention-seeking or delusional. You become a witness who can't testify because you've been conditioned to believe your own testimony is worthless. The full horror of it settled over me. My entire life, the isolation, the invisibility, the crushing certainty that I didn't matter, it had all been engineered. Someone had taken a frightened 7-year-old girl and systematically destroyed her ability to be seen, to be heard, to be believed. How did they do it? My voice was hollow. I don't know all the details, Maya admitted. But based on other cases I've researched, it usually involves repeated exposure to scenarios where the child tries to get attention and is consistently ignored or dismissed. It rewires the neural pathways involved in social recognition and self-perception. Over time, it becomes self-sustaining.
You learn to be invisible, and everyone around you learns not to see you. My parents, I said suddenly. Did they know? Were they part of it? I don't think so, Maya said gently. From what I've learned, the people who do this are very careful. They target children who are already somewhat shy or anxious, children whose parents might not notice subtle changes in behavior. They work slowly, over months or years. By the time the process is complete, everyone just accepts that this is who the child is: quiet, forgettable, invisible. I thought about my mother, about the way she'd look past me sometimes like she was trying to remember who I was. I thought about my father, who died when I was 12, and how at his funeral, people had seemed surprised to learn he had a daughter. I thought it was because I was so unremarkable. Now I understood. It was because I'd been made unremarkable. The notes, I said, the ones I've been finding, are they from whoever did this to me? Maya shook her head. No, I think they're from you. I think part of your mind has been trying to wake up the rest of you, trying to break through the conditioning. That's why some are in your handwriting and some aren't. You're literally fighting against yourself, against the programming. She pulled up another document on her laptop. Look at this. It's a list of all the social ghosts I've been able to identify over the past year. 12 people, all approximately the same age, all living in different cities now, but all originally from this area, and all of them had some connection to that pool facility during the year it closed. I scanned the list, and my breath caught. One of the names was familiar. Emily. I knew an Emily. She was in my statistics class. She sat next to me for an entire semester and then asked my name on the last day. Emily Rodriguez, Maya confirmed. She's one of them. She doesn't remember you, and you barely remember her, because you're both operating under the same perceptual suppression. When two social ghosts interact, they can see each other in the moment, but the memory doesn't stick. Your brains are programmed to forget each other. This is insane, I said, but even as I said it, I knew it was true. It explained everything, the entire architecture of my life, the shape of my loneliness, the specific texture of my invisibility. There's more, Maya said, and her voice dropped lower. I think whoever did this is still watching. I think they monitor their victims, make sure the conditioning holds. And I think they know you're starting to remember. How could they know? Because I told them, said a voice from behind us. We both spun around. Standing in my living room, having somehow entered my locked apartment without making a sound, was a woman I'd never seen before. Except that wasn't quite true.
There was something familiar about her face, something that pulled at the edges of my missing memories. "Hello, Sarah," she said, and the way she said my name made my blood run cold. It was the voice from my memory, the voice that had called to me while I hid in the storage room. "It's been a long time. I'm disappointed you couldn't let the past stay buried." Maya stood up, positioning herself between me and the woman. "Who are you?" "I'm Dr. Patricia Hammond," the woman said calmly. "I was the consulting psychologist at the Riverside Pool Facility, and I was responsible for ensuring that certain unfortunate incidents were handled discreetly." She looked past Maya directly at me. "You were always a problem child, Sarah. So curious, so observant. We knew the standard memory suppression wouldn't be enough for you. You'd find a way to remember, to tell someone. So we had to be more thorough." "You destroyed my life," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "We protected you," Dr. Hammond corrected. "The things you saw, the people involved, they were very powerful. If you'd spoken out, if you'd told anyone, you would have been in real danger. This way, you got to live. Invisible, yes, but alive." "And the others?" Maya demanded. "The 12 children you did this to?" Dr. Hammond's expression didn't change. "Collateral damage, unfortunately. We couldn't suppress just one child's memory without raising suspicions. So we created a small cluster, a group of children who all became forgettable around the same time. It provided cover, made it seem like a natural phenomenon rather than an engineered outcome." "You're a monster," I said. "I'm a pragmatist," she replied, "and I'm here because your memory is returning, which means the conditioning is breaking down. We can fix it, reinforce the neural pathways, restore your invisibility. You'll be safe again." "No one will ever hurt you because no one will ever see you." "No," I said. The word came out stronger than I expected. "No, I'd rather be visible and in danger than invisible and safe. I'd rather exist and be afraid than not exist at all." Dr. Hammond sighed. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." She reached into her bag, and Maya moved fast, lunging forward to stop her. They struggled briefly, and I stood frozen, watching this fight happen in my living room, unable to process what was real and what wasn't. Then Maya had her pinned against the wall, and she was holding something that had fallen from Dr. Hammond's bag, a syringe filled with clear liquid. "This is what you use, isn't it?" Maya said. "This is how you maintain the conditioning, periodic doses of some kind of drug that reinforces the neural suppression." Dr. Hammond didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. Maya looked at me. "Call the police. Tell them everything. I'll keep her here." I picked up my phone with shaking hands, but before I could dial, Dr. Hammond laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "You really think they'll believe you? You're invisible, Sarah. That's what we made you. Even now, even after everything, your brain is fighting against the idea that you matter enough to be listened to. Go ahead, call them. Watch what happens when an invisible girl tries to report a crime." And the terrible thing was, I could feel it, the old conditioning rising up, whispering that she was right, that no one would believe me, that I was wasting everyone's time. But then I remembered something. I remembered Mr. Harrison, my English teacher, looking at me like I was real. I remembered the barista who'd made eye contact with me at the coffee shop. I remembered Maya sitting in the library basement, telling me she saw me. I remembered that I existed. I dialed 911. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," I said when the operator answered, and my voice didn't shake. "And I need to report a crime that happened 18 years ago." The police came. They took statements. They found the syringe Maya had wrestled away from Dr. Hammond, and tests showed it contained a mixture of sedatives and experimental compounds that weren't approved for human use. They found records in Dr. Hammond's home office, detailed files on 12 children, including me, documenting years of psychological manipulation and chemical intervention. The investigation expanded. Other victims were identified, contacted, interviewed. Some remembered nothing. Some, like me, had fragments of memory that had been trying to surface for years. A few had killed themselves, unable to live with the crushing weight of invisibility they couldn't explain or escape. The people Dr. Hammond had been protecting, the ones in those photographs I'd seen, they were arrested too. It turned out that being invisible has one advantage. No one expects you to be a credible witness, so they don't try very hard to silence you permanently. They'd been operating for decades, confident that their victims had been effectively neutralized. They were wrong. The trial took 9 months. I had to testify, which meant standing in a courtroom full of people and speaking about things I'd spent my entire life being conditioned to forget. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to be quiet, to make myself smaller, to disappear into the background where I belonged. But Maya sat in the front row every single day, and every time I looked at her, she was looking back, seeing me, believing me, reminding me that I was real. The jury believed me too. They believed all of us, the 12 invisible children who stood up and told our stories. Dr. Hammond was convicted. So were the others. It didn't fix everything. I still catch myself counting the number of times I'm looked at each day. I still have moments where I feel myself fading, becoming transparent, sliding back into the comfortable prison of invisibility. The neural pathways that were carved into my brain at 7 years old don't just disappear because I know the truth now. But I'm learning. I'm learning to be seen, to take up space, to believe that my presence matters. Some days are better than others. Some days I can walk into a room and exist in it naturally, without apologizing for breathing the same air as everyone else. Other days, I'm still that 7-year-old girl hiding in a storage room, terrified of being found. Maya and I stayed in touch. She's still researching social ghosts, but now she's working with therapists and neuroscientists to develop treatments for the condition, whether it's engineered or naturally occurring. She says I'm her most successful case study, the ghost who learned to haunt the world on purpose. I went back to that coffee shop a few weeks ago, the one where I used to sit by the window and watch people. I ordered my usual black coffee, but this time I asked the barista's name. She told me, Rebecca, and then she asked mine. Sarah, I said, my name is Sarah. She wrote it on my cup, not because it was policy, not because she had to, just because she'd heard me say my name and wanted to remember it. I sat at my usual table by the window, but I didn't watch people this time. I read my book, and when other customers came in, some of them looked at me, really looked at me. A few even smiled. I smiled back. I'm not invisible anymore. Or maybe I am, and I've just learned to live with it. Learned that being seen isn't about other people at all. It's about seeing yourself, believing in your own existence, even when the world tries to tell you you're not there. I still keep a notebook, but I don't write observations about other people anymore. I write about myself, my thoughts, my fears, my hopes, my anger, my joy. I write about what it's like to exist after spending so long believing I didn't. I write about the small victories, making eye contact, starting conversations, taking up space without apologizing for it. I write about Maya, about the way she looked at me that first day in the coffee shop and saw something worth investigating, worth knowing, worth fighting for. I write about how she taught me that being invisible isn't always a curse. Sometimes it's a superpower. You see things other people miss. You notice the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the people who move through the world like they're apologizing for existing. You see them because you are them, or you were them, and that gives you a choice. You can use your invisibility to hide, to protect yourself from a world that feels too loud and too bright and too overwhelming. Or you can use it to find others like you, to build connections in the spaces between, to create a community of the unseen who see each other perfectly. I chose the second option. I started a support group for social ghosts. We meet every Tuesday evening in the library basement in the archives section where I first met Maya. We sit in a circle and we practice being visible to each other. We say our names. We make eye contact. We tell our stories. Not the dramatic ones, not the ones that would make good movies, the quiet ones. The ones about going days without anyone saying our names, about being forgotten at family gatherings, about the specific loneliness of existing in a world that looks right through you. And then we practice seeing each other, really seeing, not just acknowledging that someone is in the room, but recognizing them as fully human, fully real, fully deserving of attention and care and love. It's slow work. Some weeks people show up and can barely speak. Other weeks, someone will share something funny that happened to them and we'll all laugh, and the sound of our laughter filling that dusty basement feels like a revolutionary act. Last Tuesday, Emily showed up. Emily from my statistics class. Emily from Maya's list. Emily who'd sat next to me for an entire semester and then forgot my name. She was tentative, skeptical, clearly expecting to be disappointed. But when I looked at her and said, "I remember you. You always got coffee from the vending machine before class. You like to solve problems in pencil first, then trace over them in pen," her eyes filled with tears. "You remember me," she said, like it was a miracle. "I see you," I replied, "and I won't forget again." That's what we do now, those of us who were made invisible. We see each other. We remember each other. We prove every single day that we exist. I still have nightmares sometimes. I dream about the storage room, about hiding while someone calls my name in that voice that knew too much. I dream about dissolving, becoming transparent, fading away until not even I remember who I am. But when I wake up, I don't count the number of times I was looked at yesterday. Instead, I look in the mirror. I look at my own face, really look, the way I'd look at a friend or a stranger I wanted to remember. And I say out loud, "I see you, Sarah. I see you, and you're real." Some days I believe it more than others, but I say it anyway, because that's how you become visible after a lifetime of invisibility. Not all at once, not through some dramatic transformation. Slowly, incrementally, by choosing to see yourself even when the world has trained you not to. Maya told me once that the opposite of invisibility isn't fame or recognition or having everyone know your name. The opposite of invisibility is simply this: being known by one person, really known, seen fully, understood deeply, remembered completely. I am known now by Maya, by the people in my support group, by Rebecca the barista, by the jury who believed my testimony, by Mr. Harrison who looked at me in that English class and saw something worth acknowledging. And most importantly, I am known by myself. I know my own story now, the true version, not the one I was conditioned to believe. I know what happened to me, and I know it wasn't my fault. And I know that the invisibility I've worn like armor for 18 years was something done to me, not something I am. I'm writing this now, this whole confession, this diary of an invisible person, because I want there to be a record. I want someone someday to know that I existed, that I struggled and survived and learned to be seen, that I went from being a ghost in my own life to being a person who takes up space, who matters, who is remembered. If you're reading this, then you're proof that I succeeded. If you're reading this and you feel invisible too, whether because someone made you that way or because life just happened to work out like that, I want you to know something. You're not alone. There are more of us than you think. We're the quiet ones, the ones sitting in corners, the ones who've learned to move through the world without disturbing it. But we're here. We exist, and we see each other. Last Sunday, I went back to the coffee shop. I sat at my usual table by the window, but this time when I looked out at the street, I wasn't collecting stories about other people. I wasn't watching life happen around me while I stayed safely invisible. I was just sitting, being, existing in the world without apology. And when Maya walked in, she'd texted to ask where I was, said she wanted to see me. She smiled, that smile that suggests shared understanding, inside jokes, history. She sat down across from me and we talked for hours about nothing important, about everything important, about the weather and our favorite books and what we wanted for dinner and what it means to be alive in a world that so often feels like it's designed to make you disappear. At one point, she reached across the table and took my hand. "You know what I realized?" she said. "The day I saw you in the coffee shop, that first time, you weren't invisible. I've looked at photos from that day, and you're there, clear as anything. You were never actually invisible. You just believed you were, so completely that everyone else believed it too." "So what changed?" I asked. "You did," she said simply. "You started believing something different." I think about that a lot now, about belief, about perception, about the stories we tell ourselves becoming the reality we live in, about how the most powerful magic isn't making yourself disappear, it's making yourself appear, being seen when everything in you wants to hide, existing loudly in a world that taught you to be quiet. I'm still learning how to do that. I'm still practicing. Some days I get it right. Other days I slip back into old patterns, old fears, old certainties about my own worthlessness. But every day I try, and every day I'm a little less invisible than I was the day before. This is my story, the story of a girl who was made invisible at 7 years old, who spent 18 years believing she didn't matter, and who finally learned to see herself. This is my story, and I'm not invisible anymore. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and if you're reading this, then you see me too.